Hello everyone, my name is Phawx. This is the KT-R1. This is a handheld that a lot of people have been waiting for. This is a device that is rather compelling when we start talking about the specs of the device. Now, one thing to note here before I get too far ahead, this is a preview. This is not going to be a review video. So we can talk about the specs, performance, and everything as it is right now, but I am running a debug version of Android here, so there is going to be a discrepancy with regards to the type of performance that I'm going to be showing and what you should get as a final. There should be better performance yet, especially as there's just optimizations going along. So just wanted to kind of touch base with that first. Inside, we're using the MediaTek MT6789, more commonly referred to as the MediaTek G99. This is using TSMC's 6nm node, so performance-wise, we're going to get pretty good efficiency. Single-threaded speed-wise, we are getting double the single-threaded performance that would be on the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus or the MediaTek RG505. So we are getting a sizable boost in single-threaded speed. However, that is not going to translate into a double uplift in performance in emulation exactly. We will get better performance emulation wise, but don't expect the moon here, guys. The other thing I think we should talk about is this 1620 by 1080 IPS LCD. This 3:2 aspect ratio really shines with a lot of different retro content, specifically 4:3 content. 4:3 content looks sensational on this. There is some pillar boxing naturally, but the pillar boxing doesn't really bother me at all. It almost feels as an extension of the screen itself. So I don't really care. I know that there are some people that might actually consider stretching out the screen because the image distortion isn't going to be that impactful. However, for me, I am fine with pillar boxing as it looks just fine. On the flip side, if we take a look at GBA emulation, this is an exact 1-to-1. So when we scale this up, the image quality of GBA games looks absolutely outrageous and looks really good. Continuing along the lines of what's on the specs, if we take a look at the web page itself, the base model is 4GB of RAM and 64GB of storage. However, if we take a look on the bottom of this device, and we'll touch base more on this in a second, the build quality, if we take a look here, there is a little microSD tray, similar to a lot of cell phones where you pop this out, you put a microSD card in, and then, you would expand the storage as you normally would on Android. So that is how you would go about expanding the storage. So if you're looking at the base model, feel free to know that the microSD card slot here will expand your storage if you need it. At $170, I can see why a lot of people find this device compelling. For the chip that's on offer, for the screen that's in use, for the overall dimensions and size of the device, I can see why it's ticking a lot of boxes for a lot of people. Now, this particular model that I have is the metal version. For what it's worth, this is going to be the premium version, so it will cost more. The plastic version, the white plastic version or the yellow plastic version of the base model will be the ones that cost the least and honestly are very recommendable by me. First, you have to remember that plastic is going to weigh less. It is not going to transfer thermals as much. Not that the device gets hot at all, but because the battery is adhered to the back plate, the battery does get warm and that does transfer to this metal plate easily. It doesn't get hot, but I'm just saying you can tell that things get warm. I would wager that plastic is going to be far more thermally resistant to that. That's pretty much the nuts and bolts of the specs, the things that a lot of people are going to care about. Let's start talking about build quality. Before I start talking about analogs and D-pad, let's start going along on the bottom and the side. On the side, we got nothing here. On the back, it's kind of just plain right now. Again, this is a preview model, so I'm not sure if there's going to be any demarcations on here. Along the bottom, we do have our microSD card slot. This is where you're going to be upgrading your storage. This is relatively straightforward to do. You just need this little pinhole. I don't know if this little pin will be included in the box, but it would be nice to be able to eject this. Then we have our 3.5mm audio jack here. Over here, we have our USB-C. This is where we're going to get our power. This does support fast charging. We have dual mic inputs. So we have a mic here and a mic at the top. So there is dual mic. On the right side of the device, there's nothing. Along the top, we see a very traditional inline shoulder buttons here. This is reminiscent of what Anbernic does. It almost has the exact same feel of it. For what it's worth, I really want this type of design to be retired. It works and is fine, and I get it for a very small, thin candy bar design to have something that is relatively going to be pocketable, right? I would rather just have R1, R2 here and just have it flange out a bit. Joy-Cons don't really extend that far. These analogs already protrude, so having something that protrudes over here, I don't think is going to be a make or break moment and be overall a better gaming experience in my opinion. Here we do have active cooling on this G99. Not that it really needed it all that much. I had the fan off. The big difference here is that if it ever does need to cool it, you're going to have a consistent experience all the way through. Over here we have our volume up and down, we have power, and then on the side we complete this. So that's pretty much what to expect with this device. Now let's start talking about these face buttons up front. Now these are all membrane based. For what it's worth, this is actually very reminiscent to what Anbernic does. So if we take a look at this D-pad is the same kind of Anbernic problem that I've always had, is this bottom right corner. I don't know if it needs to be broken in like Anbernic devices do, but I have a tendency to have a problem being specific with hitting this diagonal. Overall, the D-pad is fine, but I have a far easier time being specific with hitting the bottom left diagonal as opposed to the bottom right. Overall, I would give the D-pad a B rating. It is average. It's not really anything to write home about, but it's not bad. It's not great. I've used better D-pads. It is a serviceable D-pad. The one thing that is kind of interesting here are these like 4 buttons right here. They are domed out. So you see how they have this like dome feature right here. They are also membrane based, but not as... So this is kind of like a mushy button. Not that it matters, because this is start, that's select, this is menu, and this is home. So it has this interesting crisscross pattern. However, you can still map this as select, which is what I've done for a lot of games anyway. So start and select is still, you know, working, and then you can just map this to whatever you want. So it's not that you can't map the button, it's totally mappable. It's just, it's interesting by default that this is start and that's select. It's just a weird crisscross pattern. If we're going to talk about the analogs are interesting insofar as that internally they seem to be reporting at a half polling rate. So like there is a noticeable delay in terms of what the input is there. Now, again, this is a preview build of Android, so don't write this home. For what it's worth, in use in games, it's fine. Like, I don't notice it when I'm playing a game. I only notice it when I'm actually taking a look at the inputs. The more important thing here that I want to kind of touch base on is that this analog stick is designed to have circular input. Circular input on analog sticks, I don't know why this has been a design feature from people making handhelds. I don't care if an analog stick makes a perfect circle. I want full range on an analog stick. And the reason you're going to want full range on an analog stick, like for instance, in PSP with Jak and Daxter, if I am pushing over on like the top left, you can see my character is walking even though I'm pushing all the way on the top left. What you have to do is you have to go into the PSP menu, go to calibrate analogs, and then click circular analogs. And then this will artificially make a circular analog stick into a full range analog stick. So again, this is a preview build, so one thing that I would like to see here is that this actually becomes full range instead of just circular. One thing I forgot to touch base on is there are front-facing speakers here. I am really happy to see that these are front-facing speakers instead of downward-firing speakers. They are appreciably loud. They're not going to knock your socks off sound quality-wise. They are quite decent. It's just that I don't think that they're fantastic, but they are quite good. Let's go start talking about what I think a lot of people are going to be interested in, which is the performance before we start concluding this video. While it is going to be a bit better than what already exists out there, like the Anbernic RG505 or the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, which are relatively new and recent, this will outperform them by a bit, but not by a whole bunch. There are going to be a lot of situations where things just operate better. There is better Sega Saturn emulation. In this particular regard, Dragon Force 2 requires a very accurate Sega Saturn emulator to actually function, so we need a good amount of performance just to get this to a playable state. Even though we do have really good single-threaded performance, we are still falling slightly behind on being able to emulate Dragon Force 2, especially when there's a lot of crowded battle scenes going on. However, it's really not that bad. It's still mostly playable here. If we were to take a look at what most people are interested in, like PS2 emulation, there are a lot of areas like Burnout 3. Burnout 3 plays exceptionally well on this device. It's still not absolutely perfect, but it is still quite playable on this device. Likewise, God of War 2 is also very playable. So while there are going to be a number of PlayStation 2 games that are going to be very playable, I would say that there still is going to be a few corner cases like Jak 3 where it just doesn't run with Vulkan. Hopefully, if there is any updates to the driver for the Mali GPU on the device itself where we can get better performance later on. Again, we're still running a preview version, a debug version of Android here. So I'm hoping that there's still yet more performance gains to come in the future. We're only taking a preview look at this now. As it comes to GameCube emulation, When we take a look at F-Zero GX, we don't have the ability to play this any reasonable capacity. It's stuttering a little bit too much for it to actually be worthwhile. Metroid Prime is also a game that you're never really going to hit 60 FPS here. You may actually find a better situation if you were to run the PAL version of this, which can run at 50 Hz, so you only need to hit a 50 FPS target. This is something that'll be a little bit more playable, but I still find that you're going to be not able to hit that 50 FPS mark stable enough where you will have hitches and jerks periodically. Basically, that is to say that there are going to be a number of GameCube games that are playable, but there will be a number of GameCube games that are not very playable. To kind of finish off this review, the battery time I did this, we just put PlayStation 2 emulation. We pretty much got exactly 6 hours on the dot, and that is with brightness at max, volume at max. So that is pretty much a rather worst case scenario, is that I could guarantee that at a minimum, you will get 6 hours of battery life on this device. Typically, you should look at getting closer to 8 to 10 hours of battery life on this device. So overall, price, performance, feature set, aspect ratio of LCD, this really is a very compelling device. I can understand why some people might want to sit on the fence and see where this comes to, though. From what I know, the domestic orders are going to be shipping out later this month and into January. International orders should be after that. So that is pretty much the only caveat that I would say about this device. It really is a very compelling device, but I would understand if some people have a little bit of misgivings about backing it until they actually see more orders being shipped. That is pretty much my preview of the KT-R1. As always, guys, thank you for your time, and thanks for watching.